Let's transition though and talk a little bit about Georgia. I'll open the floor to you. Like I said to start the show off, for me, speaking about a brand and a place that does not or that does really care. A lot of people are making some big things out of another Georgia player being arrested. Can I just tell you something? He shouldn't have been. Reckless driving, he got arrested for it and not issued a ticket or a summons. Some of this is this is what I believe. As someone who's been in law enforcement before in my life, I think that sometimes players get pulled over and people find out who they are and they get arrested when other individuals would be issued a summons. But as we look into this deep dive in reference to Georgia, Joe, they're not going anywhere. Where are they going? If you think that they're not going to push for a playoff spot, you're crazy. They're probably going to win the East, and they're going to do a lot of good things. But I kick it off to you first. What do you see when you look at Georgia into this deep dive?
Right. I think that this discussion would be very different if their schedule was laden with maybe they had to play LSU, maybe they have to play Alabama. We'd be having a really different conversation right now. You know what their most difficult game is next year? It's Tennessee. There's not a single other game I look at on their schedule where I think that they could lose. Now, could they go out there and do what they did against Mizzou again just because they are looking past an opponent? Yes, that's certainly possible. But for their most difficult game in 2023, to be a Tennessee team that is slightly depleted, that is also trying to refill at key important positions, there's no reason why this team can't completely run it back. And the reason why I believe that this team is going to be in that position is because not only are they refilling from multiple classes of great recruits, but more importantly, I think that they have improved at certain positions. I look at the receiver position, the fact that they added Ra Thomas and Dominic Lovett, those are big additions. Their receiving core last year was good, and I argue now it could be great in 2023. I also will say this. I think that their offensive line is getting better in 2023. I didn't think that Warren McClendon was that good of a tackle.
Well, they're returning – who?
Warren McClendon, their right tackle.
Oh, I thought you meant the Broderick. I was thinking about Broderick.
No.
Yeah, okay. But to your point, the interior of their offensive line is returning. All of them.
Yes.
All of them.
But one thing I put out there on the ether on Twitter, I think that Amarius Mims, who was a very highly recruited kid, he is the 13th highest rated recruit ever to go to the University of Georgia. Will finish the year as the best offensive lineman in the SEC. He is that good. He is that talented. He stepped in against Ohio State and dominated JT Tuimoila, however you pronounce that, in one of his first starts in his career. He has every capability to get even better. With him stepping in and all those guys returning, their sixth offensive lineman, and if he maybe even starts Xavier Truss, is a pretty good interior player. Offensive line gets better.
If I'm not mistaken, didn't Xavier Truss start 14 of 15 games last year?
He did, and he was a very
he started 14 games at left guard last year out of 15.
Yeah.
He's going to play.
Yeah.
And Joe, to your point, they went and got what's the kid's name? Monroe Freeling, I think is his name, the 5-star offensive tackle.
I like him as a recruit.
Well, he could come. Look, my point is, you talk about you didn't like their right tackle. You mean to tell me that this kid can't play right tackle? We just saw LSU have two kids that were 5 stars doing it. To your point, up front and offensively,
they're getting better, which is disturbing to say for a team that just won a national championship. They feel like they are getting better after putting out all these kids to the NFL. I'm not worried. I'm not worried that they're going to be in a situation on either lines of scrimmage, which is so important in college football. And you're talking about freshmen. They have 3 guys that I think that could maybe contribute early on. Damian Wilson's very talented, who was their highest rated kid in this upcoming class. And then Jordan Hall and Jamal Jarrett are massive defensive tackles who might work their way into the rotation, as we've seen that Georgia does like to work in contributions from younger guys. The talent pool is ridiculous. They are getting better.
Well, hold on. I agree from a talent standpoint offensively, they have gotten better.
Yeah.
But you're replacing probably and arguably one of the best offensive coordinators in the country.
Okay? Yes.
Can Mike Bobo, and I've said this before, I think Mike Bobo can do some good things because he's not had he has superior talent. Okay. I think Georgia early on, especially with this offensive line that we're talking about, is going to run the football with Carson Beck being their quarterback, because you know what helps a good quarterback or a young quarterback?
Mm-hmm.
The running game. And they did that with Stetson Bennett. The first time that they won a national title, they ran the ball at a very high clip. Replacing Todd Monken is not going to be easy. But I don't think Mike Bobo is a massive drop-off from Todd Monken. I think they have a lot of the same philosophies. And quite honestly, Kirby is going to do what Kirby wants to do. They're going to go under center. They're going to have play action. And look, you talked about the wide receiver core. Lad, as we called him during the season, Mahonky is back. You know who else is back? Brock Bowers is back, baby. And they have probably one of, if not the best tight end room. They got receivers. They got Dominic Lovett. I think in the interior, Cedric Van Pran, who I don't think we mentioned yet, is also returning the center for them. Yes. They have some bookends that they can work on. They're offensively, there's nothing, okay? And I know that Mike Bobo in the past has gotten ripped on that he doesn't open it up enough. You can't listen, when a team is dominant in the run, it doesn't matter what you do. If they dominate you up front, there is no formula to stopping them. If they can go out there and knock you and punch you in the mouth, they got better dudes than you. Mm-hmm. They're going to run the football at a very high clip. I just don't know. And, like I saw this thing about, look, I don't hate Joe Milton. I think Joe Milton can be a good quarterback in college football. Everybody's hyping up Joe Milton because he can throw a football 80 yards. That doesn't mean anything when you have this defensive line returning too. Look, Joe, here's the interesting thing for me too. We talk about a lot of the departures from Georgia. It's not as bad as it was a year ago, though. 8, listen to this, 8 of the starting 11 at Georgia are juniors or seniors that have been in the program and seen a lot. On their defensive line, as an example, they have one underclassman, that's Mikael Williams, who you and I talked about.
Might be their best player.
Might be their best player, but they have a senior nose tackle returning. They and whereas we talked about Mikael Williams, he had 4.5 sacks last year. Their front seven's going to be lethal. I look at what they've got at the line in the linebacker room. When you talk about Jamin Dumas-Johnson, okay, that kid can outright fly. When you talk about Munden Jr., when you talk about Jalen Walker, when you talk about Dalen Everett, who's going to be out there at corner, when you talk about Malachi Starks, they have dudes defensively. I think they're winning the East. I don't think Tennessee has enough. Georgia's going to do what they did a season ago. They're going to run it right at them and punch them in the mouth. Does Tennessee have enough to stop them? I don't think that they do. Now, here's what's interesting, okay, and why I think if Tennessee were to win it, it falls on one thing. Carson Beck's not ready. Carson Beck is the ultimate outlier here. But I think he's good enough for them to win. I really do think he's good enough for them to win. I think they win the East. Now, here's what I will tell you. Can they slip up and lose a game they're not supposed to? South Carolina, Auburn, whatever. It's really hard to go undefeated back-to-back seasons. Mm-hmm. It's really hard. Sometimes Nick has not been able to do it. Now, if Kirby can, that will be something that we need to talk about. But for me, I'm not going to say they're the best team in football because that's yet to be seen. They have a lot of pieces they do have to replace here. But it's hard for me to see them not being as the best team in the East at minimum.
The point you brought up on Carson Beck, that was the only question mark that I truly could identify. And I think that it's coupled with the offensive coordinator conversation of, can Mike Bobo and Carson Beck, one, work together, but two, can they replace what was already there that was a big reason for their success? As much as I've ragged on Stetson Bennett, I have said that he is a great college quarterback. He accomplished significant things. Multiple national championships is a massive accomplishment. Replacing that is very difficult. Almost, some might argue, impossible to do. It is a very hard thing to step in and bring somebody else in. I know that Beck was a highly recruited quarterback. That does help them that he has the talent. But I think that as we're talking about here, that needs to be not a liability. He just needs to be good enough. Bobo needs to be just good enough because as we've seen in the history of college football, especially recently, a mediocre quarterback, if Beck doesn't play well, can still win a national championship.
Go to Vandergrift, though?
They could if he struggles, but
here's the problem with that argument, though. And I'm gonna rip on me. Here's the problem with our argument. They still got a crap load of talent in that room.
Yeah, they have options, which is very rare to find. You don't see that. Multiple 5-star guys that are capable of stepping in. But look, if Jake Coker can win a national championship, with that roster,
different. That's different.
Oh.
Because here's the problem with the Jake Coker argument, okay? That people don't remember. Jake Coker went cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. He went crazy in the later part of that year. Yeah. Now, he had Lane Kiffin there as well. Joe, he literally was the only player on that offense, as an example, that didn't get drafted. So, of the 11 starters, let's not call this his entire offensive line, his entire receiving core, and 2 running backs got drafted.
Yeah. well, that's my point, is that I know that it is different in the sense.
It doesn't have that, though, Joe. They don't have weapons that Alabama in that year had. But Jake Coker, for what it's worth, you know what Jake Coker was? An older quarterback that had been around the block. He was an older dude who had a really elite offensive coach, which, by the way, Lane Kiffin was trolling this week that Auburn, is the only campus. that Auburn was the only campus that has a Buc-ee's. As I drink my water out of my Buc-ee's chalice here, okay? Carson, the Jake Coker thing, if he's Jake Coker, they're winning a national title.
That's my point. And Coker wasn't he wasn't Heisman level. He wasn't playing at some ridiculous level. He did enough and got hot late to help them get there. And I just think that you can rely so heavily on this defense. If that defense plays as good as it looks on paper, offensively, you realistically don't need to score. If you have a bad offensive day, I think you can win some games only scoring 24, 28 points, which is kind of a hot take. That's kind of a ridiculous thing to say, but they're so good defensively. If you come out and you throw multiple interceptions, you have multiple turnovers, I think there are games that you 100% can win with a 24-point output.
Well, people forget that Jake Coker had career highs in completions and passing yards against Michigan State, and then had 335 in the national title game. This man threw for almost 350 yards in a national title game against Clemson, I might add. I mean, he wasn't bad. Now, I think Carson Beck is more talented than Coker ever was, and so I'm there with you. Here's the thing for me, and I say this all the time. There's one flaw in Georgia, in my opinion. You are the 109th ranked team in the country in returning production. Now, they have the talent, okay? And it's always the conversation that you used to have with Alabama. They don't have a lot of production returning, but they have a lot of talent. In this case, that flaw that everybody wants to poke on with Georgia, it doesn't matter. There are some teams that it doesn't matter. Let me give an example. I think for an example, I guess you could even use LSU last year for winning the West. Joe, they had no experience. They had no real true experience. Okay. Yeah, their quarterback had some experience, but he didn't have SEC experience. There are some teams and outliers where when you don't have a lot of experience, it doesn't matter. But there are teams that do. Like Missouri has a lot of returning. You have some pieces at Florida that a lot of guys, some pieces are returning there. Georgia just head and shoulders, talent-wise, is better than everybody. And I look, people can rag on me as an LSU guy saying that, and I know LSU fans don't want to hear it, but it's just the outright truth. And the question becomes, and Joe, I'm going to say this, if they're not in the playoff again, it's not because of talent. It's because I think Mike Bobo or something happened coaching-wise there, or something that you can never prevent, in that being injuries. Mm-hmm. Alabama, when they lost national titles at times, they started piling up injuries, and that wound up affecting them. We'll see, man. I just think they're the best team in the country, and as we go into SEC media, not SEC media days, which, by the way, SEC, come on, bro, like freaking idiots. But nevertheless, when we go into SEC spring meetings, okay, which start this week, the head honcho and the guy standing at the King's table, it's not Saban anymore.
It's Kirby.
It's not Saban anymore. And Saban's had his time to respond to how Kirby's doing things, and he's not winning. So